Welcome to the Sunshine Parenting Podcast. My name is Audrey Monkey, and I am your host. Here at Sunshine Parenting, I share ideas, stories, and tips to help parents and anyone else who works with young people raise competent, kind, thriving kids. Summer camp, parenting, and happiness are the main gigs I cover here at Sunshine Parenting. So if you're interested in any or all of those topics, you've come to the right place. In this episode of the podcast, I'm talking with Kyle Littman and Paul Dreyer of Avid for Adventure. Avid for Adventure is a program for kids in Colorado and California. They teach every kid from first-time adventurers to experienced athletes from pre-K through 12th grade how fun and empowering it is to be active outdoors. They do hiking, biking, climbing, and paddling while helping kids build lasting skills and newfound confidence. I hope you enjoy this episode of the podcast. Hi, Kyle and Paul. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today. Before we get started, why don't you both introduce yourselves? Paul, why don't you introduce yourself first? And then Kyle, you can introduce yourself and tell us about Avid for Adventure.
Great. First of all, thank you so much for having us on today, Audrey. As you said, my name is Paul Dreyer, and I serve as our CEO here at Avid for Adventure, which internally that stands for Chief Empowerment Officer with Avid for Adventure. And I have been working in various roles, one way or another, ever since we started 14 years ago.
Awesome. Kyle, why don't you tell us about yourself and about your program?
Sure. My name's Kyle, and currently I'm the COO of Avid for Adventure, but I started back as a seasonal field instructor back in 2006. So I have worked and seen our programs grow, tremendously over the last decade. Before that, I was a classroom teacher and ended up finding Avid for Adventure because I wanted to spend more time with kids in an outdoor setting. Also a father of two wonderful girls, which I know will be a part of this conversation today about getting kids outside. Avid for Adventure, we are a day camp, an overnight camp, and we also work with lots of schools and special events with the overall mission to empower kids to choose an active outdoor lifestyle. So we are really focused on kids developing a passion for a non-competitive outdoor lifestyle, away from screens and more kind of seeking that power that we think nature and adventure bring. So we do that through a lot of day camps in both Colorado and California, and we also have a couple overnight programs in resident camps out in Colorado.
Awesome. What age group do you serve at Avid for Adventure?
Believe it or not, Audrey, we start as young as 3, and interestingly, that came kind of because when my oldest daughter turned 3, I started noticing that even at that young age, she was asking to spend more time inside and in front of screens, TV or, the Kindle and stuff like that. So we started programs when she turned 3, mainly so that I had a great outlet for her in the summer to want to spend time outside. So at age 3, we are teaching kids how to bike. We're teaching them how to do outdoor cooking for when they're camping with their families. And we're teaching them how to get on a rock wall and learn some basic rock climbing moves. And our programs go all the way, ideally, until a staff turns 18 and want to come work with us at our day and overnight camps.
Oh, that's a terrific story, and probably how a lot of youth programs got started because parents saw a need and wanted to make sure their kids could get what they need. Well, one of the things that we wanted to talk about today was how just getting our kids outdoors and doing these kind of adventures like you do at your program really empowers kids. So why do you think there's so much value in getting kids outdoors? And either of you can answer this, or you can both put your 2 cents in on it.
Yeah, go ahead, Paul. Take the lead on this.
Sure. I will start, and maybe we can go back and forth because there's so many touch points here and so many reasons why we feel like being outdoors is really the perfect camp environment and empowering environment for kids. The first thing that often comes to mind for me is just natural consequences. And so many of the environments that we live in our culture and our kids live in, whether that's a school or a playground, or many other environments that kids find themselves in, folks have tried really hard in our culture to remove risk. And we talk all the time about risk management instead of risk avoidance. And we really don't want to avoid risk. We want to lean in, and where folks and kids do really have natural consequences. For example, I would say natural consequences, if a kid doesn't bring a jacket to camp and it rains, it's fine to get wet at camp, as opposed to the real consequence or the higher danger of being on top of a mountain during a lightning storm, right? So we would never, we would always try to avoid that level of risk and lean into the more controlled risk so kids can experience the natural consequence, learn from that, and hopefully not only at camp, but make better decisions in life as well.
So great. Kyle, do you have anything to add on that topic of why it's so great to get kids outdoors in these adventure settings?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, we could, I'm sure, have fun things to talk about all day. But just to add a little bit on, when I was a classroom teacher and when I worked with other programs, I felt like kind of decision making and almost judgment was this top-down process and a list of rules for things that kids shouldn't do. And to really add to Paul's point, when we take kids, even 3, 4, 5-year-olds, out to a reservoir, you will never hear our instructors saying, put on your sunscreen, don't do this, get on the boat this way, here's how you do this. It's a very kind of bottom-up process where we first ask the kids, very open questions like, hey, you notice that we're no longer at camp. We are now at a reservoir. What's different about this environment? And kids start to say, well, there's a lake here, there's boats there, there's a special equipment. And our instructors are trained to really bring from kids what we call the development of positive risk-taking or judgment, where kids, real young elementary kids, can then explain, oh, look, it's windy out, we should put our boats closer together, or it's very sunny out, we should all put on our sunscreen before we go. So, we really train our instructors to, of course, they have all of these things in mind, all of these safety factors that we need to enact to keep our kids safe. But instead of telling the kids what they have to do, the kids tell us what needs to happen, and we just get to fill in any gaps that they might miss. So it's a really empowering experience for kids to kind of go through that sort of thinking at a young age.
That's awesome. I think parents can learn a lot from that. So you're a parent as well. So when you think about how parents could use these same skills in new situations with their kids, what are some of the good questions that you train your staff to just ask kids to get them thinking and taking ownership for those good choices that they're making outside?
Go ahead, Kyle.
Okay, I mean, it pertains to parenting, it pertains to relationships, it pertains to working with, young kids. I mean, and fundamentally, it starts with why, I mean, that's the great Simon Sinek podcast as to your organization starts with why, but it all starts with why and what would you do? So, when my 5-year-old, comes to me and says, cool, we're going to soccer practice, what should I wear? I mean, or pack my bag if she's in one of those moods. It's just very easy, redirected into, well, what do you think you should do? Oh, well, what's the weather? I don't know. What do you think the weather is? Let her go outside and figure out what the weather is and come back inside. I mean, all kids from a very young age know that they don't want to be cold. And then fundamentally, as Paul mentioned, with natural consequences, if she decides to wear a t-shirt out at soccer practice this time of year in Colorado, then she might be cold. And that's the lesson that I want her to learn. She's still safe. It's okay to be cold. I might even have a jacket in the car in case the weather really deteriorates, but she will learn the next time what it means to pack for soccer in this case. But also, since we're talking about it, I mean, all of those things from packing for a hike to going to the park, all of those ways that we're trying to get kids outside, the kids can learn really to do for themselves.
Definitely. I agree with that. Do you have anything to add, Paul?
Yeah, Kyle mentioned this in his first comment of something we call environmental briefings, with drawing out the quote unquote rules from the kiddos. And I think our environmental briefing is really a series of 3 questions, and they're really easy to remember and easy for your parents to remember who are listening to the podcast. And the first question is, what's changing in our environment? So Kyle's example that he just mentioned, the environment is changing because we're going from inside the house to soccer practice, right? In our camps, we might be going from a paved sidewalk trail on our bike to a trail with rocks and dirt on. So the first question is, what's changing in your environment? We can ask even the youngest kids that. Question number 2 is, based on that change of environment, look around your environment. What are the big risks? What are the big things that we really want to try to avoid? And that really should just be maybe 1 or 2 things that the kiddo comes up with at that time. And then question number 3, okay, great. What do you want to do? So how's your environment changing? What are the big risks, the top 1 or 2 risks? And what do you want to do? And we have these environmental briefings all day long. So they can come up with 1 rule, and then 10 minutes later, they're like, ooh, something else is changing in my environment. There's an additional thing that could go badly, and here, I'll make an additional rule for myself.
Wow. I feel like this could apply to everyone, even my teenage sons. I'm thinking about, when they're learning to drive, it's the same thing. You're driving and there's either traffic or different weather. The environment is changing. So what decisions do you need to make? What changes do you need to make?
Well, one of the things, we know this, that our brain and our risk management and decision-making skills, they're a muscle like everything else. And we need to use those muscles, and we use to practice those muscles, and then they'll be transferable in all sorts of environments. And we train our staff to this all the time when we're talking about environmental briefings. Sure, we want to make the campers good risk managers during camp, but I think about those campers when they turn 13 and 14. I think driving is a good example. I always use the example of the first time they're at a party with alcohol or something else that, man, we can ask ourselves, okay, my environment's changed now. What are the big risks? Well, man, that's a good question to ask in that environment. And let me make a couple of rules for myself in that environment.
That is, yeah. So basically these same skills that you're teaching your staff and using with your campers can be used in every setting with kids, even if it's not outdoors. It's just even going to a new school, any kind of new environment. You could ask them to think about those same questions. And I'll for sure put those in the show notes so parents can reread through them and see where they can apply them in their day-to-day life. So I wanted to ask you, since you're really focused on outdoor adventure, are there any particular resources or books that you have found really helpful as you've established your program's philosophy that you think parents might also learn from?
Yeah, I mean, of course, Last Child in the Woods is kind of that revolutionary book that came out that told parents using, research exactly what all of us that love to spend time outside already knew to be true, that being outside, reduces stress and improves our well-being and makes us, feel just physically better about ourselves. So, that really is a book that everyone should read. We should be reading it in schools and stuff. But, I mean, fundamentally, again, parents are busy. I know that, books and book clubs, or sometimes get overlooked as we deal with the logistics of our everyday lives with work and raising children. But I mean, I think more so than books, parents just have to know what works. And, to me, what works, it's about involving kids in the process of like outdoor excursions and just right sizing your expectations. For our campers, it's not about getting to the top of a rock climb. It's simply a positive experience learning about rock climbing. So, success just can look so different for kids. For some at a rock climbing site, it's really just about putting on a harness and learning about belaying, and a child can have a fantastic rock climbing day that way at our camps. Or sometimes when I go out on family hikes, like, sure, if it was me on a hike, I would love to get to the top of the mountain. But when I'm with my girls, we might stop 25 feet off the trail and play in the creek all day long. And that was a very positive, successful outdoor experience for them that they're going to want to do again, much more so than if I drag them to the top of the mountain. So I feel like parents just have to really right-size their expectations, make it so social. Bring a friend when you're going on a hike, bring great treats or even candy if you're going on a hike or if you're doing something. But if you look at just what is going to just keep the kids smiling and engaged, then that's the way to do it.
Definitely. Do you have anything to add, Paul?
I'll throw out on a different tack to answer that question a couple of resources. And it's so interesting. We're all about getting kids and our staff away from screens and away from screen time. And yet, when you ask about what resources are out there, clearly the internet is an amazing resource. So I'll throw out 2 internet resources for your parents. One is, I think you're from California, this organization, Children and Nature Network. Yep. It was actually founded by Richard Louv, who wrote Last Child in the Woods. Children and Nature Network, which is childrenandnature.org, is a great resource online. And another one that's based in D.C., but works with programs all over the country, is Outdoor Alliance for Kids. And that web address, and I can share these with you offline, is outdoorallianceforkids.org.
Okay, yeah, those are great ideas. I wonder too, I love Richard Louv's work. I wonder if he has a TED Talk or anything that parents can watch that's more of a summary of his book and his work. It might be on the Children and Nature Network, but if there is something, I'll definitely put a link to it because he's done some great work, and I follow Children and Nature on Twitter and love lots of the things that they share about getting kids outside. When you were talking, I was thinking about we have a backpacking program, and I don't know, you can tell us about it if you have one of those as well, but our whole philosophy with our backpacking now is just having it be an enjoyable experience for the kids. So we had a parent last summer who was a former camper who was really upset that the kids weren't going on a 5-day, 50-mile hike like he remembered from back when he went to camp for a month and, was out in the woods for 5 days. And we have shorter sessions now, for one thing, but we explained to him, well, that was then, that philosophy then. We hope that our campers who are 10, 11, 12, going out on these overnight trips with lots of chocolate on short hikes into pretty places will want to become older adolescents who do want to go out on multi-day hikes. And we do offer that for like teenage kids, if they sign up for that program, a longer hike. But we're the same way. We just want kids to like it and like being outdoors and learn to love it, because that's what will make them and benefit them in terms of their well-being in the outdoors. If you make them hate it by making it too hard, no one's going to go backpacking ever again. So do you do backpacking at your program or that kind of thing as well?
Go for it, Kyle. Oh, maybe we lost Kyle.
I don't know if he's here.
I'm happy to jump in. As Kyle mentioned, so we have lots of the primary type of camps we run are day camps, but then we have 2 overnight camps in Colorado. And both of those overnight camps offer expedition programming, so backpacking. We start kind of similar to the point that you were just mentioning, Audrey. At our youngest overnight camps, they do a 1-night overnight and it's actually on site. So they pack a backpack in their cabins and they walk a few hundred yards kind of into a large field away from camp, and they do a camp out. So they get the experience of carrying their stuff, but the tent is already set up. And then once kids are age 10 and above, everyone at our overnight camp does a backpacking trip. And those range from 3 to 6 nights out. Different areas, different skill levels, and kids have a way of choosing their different skill levels as they sign up for camp.
That sounds awesome. I think backpacking is one of those things kids don't think they're going to like it, but I often find that it's the thing they'll say was the most memorable part of their camp. Do you find that as well?
Absolutely. And, my background, I've been in the world of outdoor and adventure education for over a couple of decades now, and a bunch of that time has been with more extended backpacking trips and expeditions that are 1 to 3 months long. So I agree with the point that the kids come back always thinking that, man, that was the best part of the trip. And also, the longer, the better. and I think kiddos don't realize it. And once you really do reach a point of after a few nights out, kids really are able to soak into a different rhythm and really able to deepen a lot of the learning we've been talking about today.
Okay, so a couple more things. For Avid for Adventure, what are the session lengths? What do most kids do? What's your typical program like?
Kyle?
Yeah, sure. So typical program for our day camp, it's a 1-week, Monday through Friday day camp. So, many kids come for more than one session because we have great diversity in that, our classic, how most kids start is our multi-sport camp, where every day they're doing a different one of our core sports, being mountain biking, rock climbing, hiking, stand-up paddleboarding, kayaking, canoeing. So, that's the classic for the kids that just want, a little bit of everything. And then generally, as kids, come back year after year, they tend to want to specialize or they just fall in love with something. So we also offer, single sport camps in all of those sports as well, survival skills, mountain biking, climbing. So really on the day camp side, there is, something for everyone. We often say that, we want every age kid and every type of kid in a parent's car to be excited at drop off. So we've tried to create the diversity of day camp programming that all kids can get out of the car excited about how they want to spend their day. And then overnight camp, that starts for incoming first graders. And again, that's because of my daughter. I was ready to send her to overnight camp, and none of the other local camps started when she finished kindergarten. So we started a mini camp for her age and her friends, and that's only 3 nights long. And then as the kids get to 2nd to 4th grade, they get to spend a week with us at overnight camp. And then starting in 4th grade, they get to spend 2 weeks with us for overnight camp.
Oh, that sounds terrific. So when you're talking to parents, I'm sure you've had some of these parents who say that their kid's not outdoorsy and kind of a homebody or just likes their screens. What advice do you give those parents in order to help them encourage their kids to participate in a program like yours?
Sure. I think it's a great question, and one that we do get fairly often. As Kyle was just mentioning, our best introductory camp is a multi-sport camp where Monday through Friday, each day you get to do something different. And I think that is really empowering for the kid and the family to know that this is bad language, but they won't be stuck in one activity all week long. And inevitably what we find with kids is, regardless of how athletic you've been or what sports or what clubs you've been on, throughout that week of camp, there's going to be some kids that excel in like climbing more than they like paddling or more than they like hiking. And it's this really cool progression that we see during a week of camp, because kids are able to step into more empowering leadership roles depending on the day. Because on paddle day, when we're out kayaking, that one kid is really having a great time and catching on to the paddle skills, and they're able to help Joey, who's not doing that well. And then the next day, it flip-flops during climbing or during hiking. So it's really easy for us to show to parents. And then the other thing we remind kids, as both you and Kyle spoke about well, is that we're all about kids having fun. And there's different ways to do that with all of our sports over one day of climbing. This group of kids might be working on these 2 skills that are advanced, and a whole nother group of kids are working on a whole nother set of skills that are not quite advanced. So we have really low ratios from instructors to campers to provide those varying skill learning opportunities.
That sounds so good. I was just thinking as you were talking too, one of the great things about camp programs in general is that they do expose kids to a bunch of activities that maybe the parents don't do themselves. So like a parent might have a particular outdoor activity that they really like the parent might really like hiking, and that might be the only thing that they've really been, able to do with their kids. So how great for the kids to be able to go to a program like yours and just try out some of these different things and maybe discover something outdoors that they haven't done with their family that becomes something that they enjoy and pursue, into adulthood. So that is just terrific. Okay. Any other advice that you want to give as we close off for parents about how either to encourage them to get outdoors or how to use some of your philosophies that you use at camp in their parenting?
Yeah, I mean, I can start with that. I would say a couple things. One is similar to what you were just saying, Audrey. Just don't typecast your child as someone who doesn't like to be outside. I feel like, this used to happen when I was a classroom teacher, when a parent would tell me all about their kid, and then my experience with that child would be so radically different. And, I especially got this when I was a camp counselor, as opposed to on the admin side. But, parents would come to me Monday morning and said, oh, my kid just likes video games. Good luck with him. He's not going to this and that. And it's like, 9 times out of 10, it seemed like that child was the absolute happiest, just having the most engaging, successful experience doing all these different activities. So it could be because what you mentioned, that the kid associates being outside with the long hikes that his mom or dad like to do. And maybe, she's never been kayaking or paddle boarding or rock climbing. And this is just a brand new world that hasn't been really open yet. And, we're able to provide those opportunities for the kids. So that would be thing one, is that, especially at the ages that we're talking about, starting at age 3, like the world is still full of just endless possibilities. So let the kids explore that on their own without deciding for them. And then I guess my second piece of advice is really just to start small. If your child is currently spending a lot of time inside, you might not within 1 week turn them into a rock climber, but you can, get them out into the backyard, because even 5 to 10 minutes outside after school doing unstructured play or running around or playing with chalk or hopping on their bike, that is just kind of the breadcrumb that they might need towards larger outdoor activities in their future.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. Anything you want to add, Paul, as we close up?
I'll add one thing here, and I agree with like what Kyle said in terms of starting small, and then if you find that your kids are ready and asking for a larger outdoor adventure, really remember, I said this earlier, that there are real risks and a lot of perceived risks. For example, parents always think that rock climbing is the most dangerous thing that we do, and statistically, basically nobody gets hurt rock climbing at all. It's actually a lot of perceived risk and very little actual big risk. And just understanding that, and so reaching out to resources to ask about what are the real and what are the perceived risks. We would love to be a resource for any of your parents, and I'm sure you can share our contact information. So either someone like us or other local resources that might have more knowledge of some of the higher level outdoor activities.
That's really great advice. I think that's so true. Parents have fears about, I think a lot of times, the wrong things. Like they basically say that if your kid is wearing their seatbelt and a helmet when they ride their bike, and keeping them safe around your backyard pool, are probably the most important things. And then a lot of the things we do at camp, like you said, they're wearing harnesses, they have trained staff. So it looks scary, but it's really not a high risk type situation. So that's really good input. Well, it was so great talking with both of you today, and I will definitely put links to all your information. And I thank you so much for being on the podcast. We'll have to do it again sometime.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Great.
Thanks for having us.
So much for us.
I got some great tips talking with Paul and Kyle, and I hope you did as well. You can find notes, links, and more information about our conversation at my website at sunshine-parenting.com. Search for episode 29. For this episode, I'm going to leave you with a quote from Richard Louv, who we talked about. In his book, Last Child in the Woods, Saving Our Children from Nature Deficit Disorder, Louv says, "Time in nature is not leisure time. It's an essential investment in our children's health, and also, by the way, in our own."